Darren and I get questions all the time about, well, which herbicide should I be using early in the spring for a burn down? We commonly see farmers around the United States spraying 2,4-D in their burn down. Now look, if you're doing this at all within a month of planting almost any crop, it's going to be rare for me to ever advise a farmer to use 2,4-D. So let me make this simple and just say, take 2,4-D out of the burn down. It's way too late in the season now to even think about 2,4-D in a burn down in front of corn or soybeans. We'll talk today about which products you should be using.
Well, weed control is definitely not getting any easier on the farm with resistant weeds, and then some of the weed pressure that's coming, especially in reduced till and no-till situations. It's difficult to control without doing that tillage. So taking a herbicide that works off the table is a tough thing for many growers to do. The important thing that we're trying to push today is not about we don't like 2,4-D, we do, and we're going to use more 2,4-D when we go forward as we have 2,4-D tolerant crops. But until that point, the loss that we're experiencing in yield and stand in many cases is just not worth the risk.
Yeah, the whole thing is there's enough risk in farming as it is. Why take a risky herbicide out and use it in a burn down? Now, for years, a lot of people have said, well, 2,4-D is cheap, so I want to go with something cheap. Well, gramoxone's come way down in price. That's cheap, and it's better than 2,4-D. So if it was me, what I would do in front of soybeans is run out there with either Authority or Valor plus Metribuzin. So right away now I've got two different herbicides. I got a PPO, and then I've got that Metribuzin, the triazine. They're both decent at burn down. If I throw Roundup with them, in most cases that's enough. If you have Roundup resistant weeds, I would throw gramoxone in there. If you do that, now we're in great shape. And by the way, if you're planting Extend soybeans this year, throw dicamba in. Absolutely don't use the 2,4-D. And I know it'll say on the label, yes, 14 days in advance of planting you can spray 2,4-D, but let's keep in mind that's if you have heat and moisture. So if you're in a drier, colder area of the country, 14 days, in my book, as an agronomist for many, many years, that is not enough. You're still going to have at least a small degree of crop injury in my experience.
Well, let's be honest, when are a lot of these applications being made? Well, in intention up front, sure, 14 days, yep, I won't plant for 14 days, but then the sun comes out, then the weather turns, and we sure saw that this spring where, wow, it didn't look like we're going to get in quite as fast as we were going to in certain areas, and guys said, boy, it's going to be a month before I'm in the field, and 10 days later, we're out planting and we're kicking up dust. So conditions can turn really fast in the spring. That's why once you put that 2,4-D out, you've really limited yourself. Now you've got a big window that you have to wait just for the label requirements, and then possibly even longer that you really should wait.
Yep, so absolutely get 2,4-D out of your soybean burn down. You don't need it, you don't want it. It's going to hurt your soybeans in many cases. Might not be a lot of yield loss, but it's some. Now let's talk about corn. In front of corn, also way too risky. You can use dicamba. Dicamba, pre-emerge, pretty safe. Okay, I'd much rather have the dicamba out there than I would 2,4-D. And personally, I like dicamba rate for rate better than I do 2,4-D anyway. So if it was me, I would go with dicamba in front of corn. I would run dicamba in front of Extend soybeans. I'd run gramoxone in front of most other soybeans. Some people use Liberty. You can do that. It's kind of expensive. So we've got plenty of other options out there. That's what we're trying to say today. Just stay away from the 2,4-D. I realize it's labeled, but again, in our experience as agronomists for many years, we've just seen way too much yield loss, stand loss. It's a problem.
Hey, Brian, one other thing you didn't mention was Sharpen. Now, when we talk about in front of corn, I really like Verdict. Wow, I've got a good strong rate of Sharpen, which is an excellent broadleaf burn down product. Also in front of wheat, you can use a very strong rate of straight Sharpen, and that's an excellent burn down product there. So you've got some really good options there where you really don't need the 2,4-D.
Okay, but you left out the most important one, and that's Sharpen in front of soybeans. The reason why we don't recommend that is because we'd rather see you use Valor or Authority. Use Valor or Authority, they're almost as good at burn down as Sharpen, and then you can use a much higher rate, meaning you're going to have probably a couple months worth of residual, whereas with Sharpen, at best you'll get a couple weeks worth of residual. So it's well worth the money. Go to Valor or Authority instead of Sharpen as a burn down in front of soybeans.
Just to wrap things up here, where can you use 2,4-D? Really the only acceptable place is in front of enlist crops. So if you've got enlist cotton or enlist corn this year, well, that would have been a spot where you could go ahead with that 2,4-D in the burn down. Just follow the label in terms of which products you can use and what the timing should be.
If used properly, 2,4-D actually can control our weed of the week. We'll show you the best program for controlling our tough weed coming up later in the show.